This video is brought to you by Card Kingdom, and while supplies last, if you mention Saffron Olive in your order notes, we'll hook you up with a free Saffron Olive sticker with any Card Kingdom order. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Commander 2019 spoilers. And today marks the official start of spoiler week for Commander 2019. Yes, we've had some spoilers from Gen Con over the weekend, but today kicks off the one deck a day spoiler season. So today and for the next 3 days after that, by the end of the day, we're going to have a full Commander deck published on the Wizard site. So today is technically Sultai Morph Day. However, we got a couple of stragglers to talk about first from over the weekend. And then we'll talk about all the cards that we have so far coming in the Sultai Morph deck. And then, like I said, you can find the full deck list going up later today on MTGPreviews.com. Also on the Wizard site, of course, I'll be releasing it there. So before we jump into it, a super quick reminder. If you haven't already, it would be amazing of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk some sweet new Commander 2019 cards, starting with a new Gerrard. Gerrard, Weatherlight hero, and this card is pretty sweet. So 4 mana, 3/3 Boros Legendary Human Soldier. It has first strike, and whenever it dies, you exile it and return to the battlefield all artifacts and creatures that were put in your graveyard from the battlefield this turn. So Gerrard Weatherlight hero, it's basically kind of a creature-based version of Face Reward or Second Sunrise to some extent. Yeah, there's some differences, but essentially, if you can get a bunch of stuff to go in your graveyard, and then Gerrard dies, you get all that stuff back on the battlefield, and because it can be your commander, it's especially scary, and opens up some really interesting, sweet, and potentially powerful combos. So first off, on level 1, there's a really easy way to play Gerrard. You just play Gerrard, then you play like a Wrath of God, and you blow up all your stuff along with Gerrard, then you get back all your stuff. If you have like a Chroma's Vengeance, you're blowing up all artifacts along with creatures, so you're getting back all your mana rocks and all your creatures. So basically, you get to Wrath for free and sort of turn your Wrath into, I don't know, like a Cyclonic Rift almost, where, yeah, you aren't really losing anything. Your opponents are going to lose everything because Gerrard's going to get your stuff back, and then since Gerrard, when you exile it, is going to go back to your command zone, then you can just recast it again, do it again the next turn if you want to. So you can play just like kind of Boros Wrath control with Gerrard, and it would be pretty strong. The other option is to build like a combo deck with Gerrard. So, for example, we have cards like Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar. So the idea here is pretty simple. You play a bunch of stuff, a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. You can sacrifice all of your creatures to make mana with Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar, and then after you sacrifice the rest of your board, you sacrifice your Gerrard, which is going to put back all the creatures that already died. Gerrard's going to go back to your command zone, and then, in theory, if you have enough mana from your Phyrexian Altars, from your Ashnod's Altars, from your lands, then you can just do it again. You just sacrifice all of your stuff again, sacrifice Gerrard last, use your mana, recast it, and if you can throw whatever into the loop, maybe you have like a Perforos to trigger when creatures come into play, or Falair of the Hatebound is a sweet one. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, deals damage equal to its power to creature or player, so you sack a bunch of creatures, including Flayer of the Hatebound, then you're going to get back your Flayer with a bunch of other stuff from your graveyard, deal a ton of damage. So you have this not only like Boros control potential with Gerrard, but kind of Boros combo, sacrifice combo, Boros Aristocrats style deck, which I think is really cool, and I think that that's the main reason I love Gerrard. And I gotta give a shout out to Wizards here, because traditionally, over the course of Commander's history, Boros has been kind of a boring aggro color. If you look at some of the most popular commanders in Boros over the history of the format, you got like Aroises and Aurelias and Gacellas, basically like, I'm going to play aggressive things, I'm going to attack you a lot and hope for the best. Well, Gerrard, it's very different. Like we were talking about, it's Boros control, it's Boros Aristocrats, and when you combine that in with like Feather the Redeemed, which came out in War of the Spark, Fire Song and Subspeaker came out just a year ago now, Wizards has done an amazing job of essentially just expanding Boros's color pie options, I guess, in the Commander format. So now, if you sit down and build a Boros deck, yes, you can be the traditional Boros aggro beatdown, but you can also be all these other things like Feather Combo, Fire Song and Sunspeaker is like this weird damage life gain deck. Gerrard gives you the possibility to play like Aristocrats. So I really love what Wizards has done with Boros, turning it from a pretty one-dimensional color combination into a really sweet color combination with a bunch of different options and possibilities and ways to build around it. And Gerrard is a very cool, interesting new piece to the puzzle, a unique commander, gonna be sweet to build around, love the combo potential, and just the control options as well. So really sweet new commander coming in Commander 2019. Also, as we finish up our From the Weekend stuff, before we get to the Morph cards, we got Scaretiller, a new Scarecrow, and this card is actually pretty spicy for a common. 4 mana, 1/4. When it becomes tapped, you can either put a land into play from your hand tapped, or a land from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this weird sort of rampy spell. So Scaretiller, obviously best if you can tap it without attacking. I mean, in Commander, you got 4 players. In theory, you can try to attack the person that doesn't have a blocker, but in reality, it's a 1/4. It's going to get blocked. It's going to get killed. However, there's some ways to build around this, like Lair of Subdual, oppositions, ways that you can tap your own creatures for value without attacking, and then you can just keep using Scaretiller. It's this consistent source of ramp while getting some extra value out of your Lair of Subdual or opposition. Also pretty cute with Maze of Ith, where you can like attack with Scarekiller to tap it, and then you're able to untap it with Maze of Ith to prevent all the damage to it, so that gives you another way you can just attack every single turn. So I think the most powerful aspect of Scaretiller is really the fact that you can get lands back from your graveyard. Putting lands into play from your hand is fine, but as we've seen with like Abriel Grazer and Standard, it's great when you have an extra land, but then eventually you get to the point where you don't have any lands left, and then it's not really doing anything anymore. Scaretiller, thanks to the ability to reanimate lands from the graveyard, you should always have some action, unless the graveyard gets shut down, because you can use things like fetch lands, Wooded Foothills, Evolving Wilds, even the original Mirage fetch lands, and that's a land that you get in and out of your graveyard, essentially every turn. You tap your Scarekiller, reanimate your Wooded Foothills, then the next turn you can crack it, get it back in your graveyard, tap your Scaretiller, get it back again. So it gives you this really consistent sort of ramp if you're willing to build around it a little bit. So I think Scaretiller actually really powerful. It looks like an innocent little common, but I actually think it's a pretty strong card and could show up in a lot of decks because it's colorless, so you can play in anything. Obviously, if you have fetch lands, way to get land in and out of your graveyard, self-mill effects, it gets even better. But I think this could be in the conversation for a lot of different decks. Plus, it's a Scarecrow, so if you want to go like Reaper King, good option there as well. So those were our holdovers from the weekend, which means now it's time to talk about cards from the Sultai Morph deck, starting with one of our backup legends, Volrath the Shapestealer. And this card's pretty interesting. So 5 mana, 7/5 legendary shapeshifter. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a -1/-1 counter on up to a creature, and then you can pay 1 mana, and until your next turn, Volrath becomes a copy of target creature with a counter on it, except it's a 7/5, and it has this ability. So Volrath, it's got good stats, it's got a fun ability, it can do some cool things. I'm not exactly sure the home for this card, though. So it works well with -1/-1 counter themes. Hapatra, Yawgmoth, Necroskitter. There are some good payoffs for putting -1/-1 counters on things, so that is one obvious possibility. You can also go really deep with like Contagion Engines, Black Sun Zenith, Midnight Banshees, ways to put a -1/-1 counter on basically everything. And then Volrath has the option to turn into literally any creature on the battlefield for just 1 mana. Maybe you could do some shenanigans where you can like copy something that you can pump a bunch of times and turn into an effect creature after blocks. Weird combo-y shenanigans. But I think that's the most obvious home. Since Volrath itself gives a -1/-1 counter to things, build the -1/-1 counter deck, but that is far from the only way to build about Volrath. It could be a really sweet Sultai Infect commander. There's not really a 3-color Infect legend, and Volrath might be as close as it actually gets, being able to take advantage of the -1/-1 counter theme. You get all 3 primary Infect colors. The other thing that's interesting and worth mentioning about Volrath is even though it gives a -1/-1 counter, it doesn't require a -1/-1 counter to copy something. All it cares about is a creature having any counter, which means you can build like a Sultai +1/+1 counter deck, maybe an experimental Crash style deck. You could put bounty counters on things with Bounty Hunter. You could put spore counters on things with Elvish Farmer, and Volrath could still copy it. So there's a lot of other possibilities. Don't get stuck on the -1/-1 counter aspect, because the copying ability works with any counter. So I think Volrath, I really like that it's another Sultai commander that isn't graveyard-centric. I don't know exactly the best way to take advantage of it, but certainly a sweet and cool new legend. Next up, we got Rayami, First of the Fallen, another mythic Sultai legend, and this one, kind of weird. Sultai colors, but it's a vampire. I think this might be the first green vampire that we've ever seen. You get a 5/4, and it has a couple of abilities. First, when a non-token creature would die, instead it gets exiled with a blood counter, and then as long as an exiled creature with a blood counter has a bunch of different abilities: flying, double strike, death touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, protection, reach, trample, vigilance. Rayami has that as well. So this is kind of the commander version of Soul Flare, and Soul Flare, it's a popular casual build around, and Rayami gives you a way to take advantage of this from your command zone. So you can play your Rayamis, play your Soul Flares, your Carrion Wanderers, your Majestic Mariarchs. So there is a bunch of support already existing for the let's see how many mechanics and abilities I can give my creatures mode, and Rayami is a cool commander to take advantage of that. It's in the right colors. The downside of Rayami is it's a little bit challenging to build around. Obviously, you can just play stuff with a bunch of abilities, like you play a Vampire Nighthawk, it has flying, death touch, lifelink. If you can get that on the battlefield, and then it dies while Rayami's out, it'll have a blood counter, and the nice side of Rayami is that that blood counter sticks around. So in theory, you could play Vampire Nighthawk, Baleful Strix, whatever, a bunch of creatures with abilities, get out your Rayami, Damnation, let's say, to wrath the board, your Vampire Nighthawk, your Baleful Strix, they're all going to get exiled, but then next time you recast Rayami from your command zone, all those exiled cards with blood counters are still there, so it's immediately going to have all those abilities. So that's probably the easiest way to take advantage of Rayami. The downside is, do you really want to like play creatures with the intention being to kill them? I guess you can hope that your opponent plays stuff with mechanics and abilities on them, and in general, that's something that should come up. Most commander decks have creatures. Most creatures are not vanilla. They have abilities. So I guess you just play it fairly, hope for the best, use as much removal as you can to blow up your opponent's stuff, and trust that it's going to work out. The other thing that's worth mentioning about Rayami is it's a form of graveyard hate, and graveyard hate, really powerful in Commander. Most Commander decks, well, many Commander decks are using the graveyard to some extent. There's decks that are exclusively focused on the graveyard, but then a lot of decks have some amount of recursion, some graveyard value built in. So exiling a creature when it would die is a nice upside against like Reanimator decks, various decks that are using the graveyard for value. So Rayami, even discounting all the other stuff it can do, it gives you essentially like a Kalidas style trigger, a Ravenous Slime style of trigger. So the incidental graveyard hate is a nice upside of Rayami. So Rayami, again, unique commander, a unique Sultai commander. It's sort of graveyardish, but not really, because you're exiling everything. But it does care about creatures dying, and I think that it's a card that has potential to be powerful. But again, I'm not exactly sure the right way to build around it, and I think that's maybe a good thing. One of the things I have been liking about Commander 2019 so far is it has a lot of commanders that you look at them and you're like, wow, that's different. That's not normally what Boros does. That's not normally what Sultai does. And while that means it's going to be more challenging to build around them because you're not just slamming it into the traditional shell of its colors, it really opens up a ton of possibilities and cool gameplay that otherwise wouldn't be available in the Commander format. So well done, Wizards, with printing these unique, weird, kind of non-traditional for their colors commanders. Next on our list, we have Sudden Exchange, a sweet new instant. 4 mana, instant speed, split second, so no one can respond to it once it's on the stack, and you exchange control of target non-creature spell and target creature, then the player who controls the spell may choose new targets for it. So here, there's basically a couple ways that you can take advantage of this. My first thought was to use this kind of as like a weird commandeer. Your opponent goes to cast, I don't know, a big planeswalker or something, and you're able to trade a bad creature for your opponent's good spell, and take their Planeswalker, take whatever big, powerful instant and sorcery, a Ugin, a Torment of Hailfire, Demonic Tutor. So I think that's probably the easiest way to think about this card, having some sort of semi-useful creature on the battlefield and be able to turn it into a really good spell that your opponent casts. On the other hand, you could do it the other way as well, where maybe you cast, I don't know, a Ponder, some cheap spell that isn't all that impactful, and steal your opponent's best creature. And because it has split second, there's no way for your opponent to blow it out in response, so I think this has potential to be pretty powerful. 4 mana to steal potentially a 10 mana, a 20 mana spell is very powerful. So I think that sudden exchange, I really like it. Being able to commandeer your opponent's stuff is sweet, and maybe you could get some value by casting a spell and stealing a creature as well. So lots of flexibility for just 4 mana. Next up, we got Path of Return, and this one, it's pretty straightforward. 2 mana, you can return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand, or put your commander into your hand from the command zone, and if you pay 4 mana thanks to Entwine, you get to do both. So it's basically a nature spiral, but it's a nature spiral with some significant upside. It has the upside that you can bounce your commander into your hand from the command zone, and that's good in basically any deck in the late game where the commander tax is going to add up, so this is a way you can one-shot get around the commander tax. Maybe your commander is up to costing, I don't know, 12 mana from the command zone, but when you Path to Return, with Entwine, you get back something from your graveyard, get your commander, can cast it for its natural mana cost. It's also especially helpful with a couple of cards that don't normally see play as commander, but maybe thanks to Path of Return can actually see play. So Inaim 1 and Meotian of Life's Web have powerful abilities, but they're powerful abilities that only work when you cast it from your hand. So Path of Return gives you a way to take advantage of these commanders, which are really difficult to play because they don't really do their thing from the command zone, and get them into your hand. So easy staple if you want to take the Inaim 1 or Meotian of Life's Web challenge. Otherwise, just a fine value card. Like, getting stuff back from your graveyard, that's fine. Nature Spiral, it's a fine card, and you get some extra upside that maybe in the late game, you get to cast your commander for 4 mana instead of 12 mana by getting around the commander tax. Next up, we get Gift of Doom, and this is just a wacky, weird card. 4 mana aura, enchanted creature has Death Touch and Indestructible. However, it's a morph card, so you can cast it face down as a 2/2 creature and flip it up into the aura by sacrificing a creature, and when you flip it up, you get to attach it to something. So obviously, it's a fine protection spell. Put it on a creature. Indestructible means it's surviving Wrath, it's surviving a decent amount of removal, and the combination of Indestructible and Death Touch means it's really hard to attack into. Your opponent attacks into it, you just block, kill their thing with Indestructible. The weirdness of it is this strange morph ability. So clearly, you could just play it as a way to protect your commander. Any of the commanders that you get in the precon decks is fine. Any other deck, we see cards like Darksteel play. They just give a commander Indestructible, or any creature Indestructible. Those cards see play. Gift of Doom probably a little worse because you can't move it around as easily as you could in equipment, but still, making your best thing Indestructible, that does have value. You can also use it in some sort of self-sacrifice style deck. Maybe you got Blood Artists, Sinzulaport Cutthroats, and Pitiless Plunders, then Gift of Doom is giving you a free sack outlet. It's one shot, but still a free sack outlet, and then maybe you're enchanting your Blood Artist to make it indestructible so you can proceed to combo off and not worry about removal. Also, a good way to trigger things that care about something dying. Like maybe you want to Mind Slicer the table. Gift of Doom is a free instant speed uncounterable sacrifice outlet. So you have your morph down, you play your Mind Slicer, and then whatever timing is most inopportune for your opponents, you just Gift of Doom, sack Mind Slicer, flip it up. Maybe you want to flip Journey to Eternity. Maybe you want to grind out Kakushu value by having it go to the graveyard to drain everyone. So I think Gift of Doom, while it's a very unique and strange card, it offers a decent amount of value. Protecting your commander is good. Protecting your best creatures are good. Death Touch Indestructible makes a really good wall of defense. Plus, sometimes sacrificing stuff is actually an upside, especially in a black deck. We also got Pendant of Prosperity, which I think is the card that you mostly want to give to me. 3 mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, it does so under the control of an opponent of your choice, and then the person who controls it, obviously, can pay 2, tap it to draw a card and put a land into play from their hand, and the owner of Pendant of Prosperity gets to do the same thing. Draws a card, puts a land into play from hand. So I feel like this is a card that's kind of like group huggy. is the most obvious application. You give it to an opponent, they kind of are happy because they get to draw cards. You're happy because you get to draw cards for free as they draw cards. The question is, how often is your opponent going to activate it? And I think that's where targeting the right player with this becomes really key. Obviously, you can just use it politically and give it to whoever you're trying to curry favor with. On the other hand, you can give it to maybe the white player that maybe doesn't have a lot of card advantage and is going to be really tempted to activate this. Give it to the player who's empty-handed. Give it to the player who's like me, who just loves drawing cards, and you know, even if it's probably not correct, I'm going to draw a card no matter what because I want to draw that card. So if you can give this to the right player, you have the ability to maybe just draw an extra card every single turn for free and also ramp yourself, which means you and the player who are activating it probably going to pull ahead of the rest of the table. So it's a great way to make a friend, I would say, at the commander table, and a cool group hug option as well. Next up, we got Scroll of Fate, and I think this card is actually a little bit busted. So on level 1, it's a 3-mana artifact. It lets you manifest a card from your hand. So you tap it, you put a card from your hand into play as a face-down 2/2 creature. You can turn it face up for its mana cost. So basically a build your own morph, essentially. So Scroll of Fate works really well in the morph deck. You got Kadena, you can put stuff into play from your hand, you draw a card, it's a combo. You could put morph things into play, and morph them for their morph costs if you want to. So that's easy as well. However, what makes this card really broken is blink decks. So in a deck like Brago, or Rune, or Aminatu, you have this card that can put your best thing, maybe some big 6 mana, 8 mana, 10 mana thing into play, and then when you deal damage with Brago, or when you tap your Rune, or flicker with Aminatu, you get that back face up for free. So you get around the paying the manifest cost to flip it up, and it's a way you can take advantage of non-creatures. If you manifest a non-creature, you can't flip it up. You can only do that if it's a creature card, but with a blinking or flickering commander like Brago, Rune, Aminatu, you can put a, let's say, a Omniscience into play, face down, for free with a 3-mana artifact, and then flicker it back up, and I think that's the true power of this card. What I'm scared about is you can just, like, put Omniscience into play as a manifest, and then for 1 mana, Cloud Shift it. For 3 mana, Ghostly Flicker it, and then it's going to come back face up as a real Omniscience, and you're just going to play your whole deck and win the game. So while Scroll of Fate might just look like this random, like, weird synergy card, I think it's actually incredibly powerful, not so much in a morph deck, although it's fine in a morph deck, but in any sort of flicker deck or flicker combo deck, Scroll of Fate is going to be one of the most powerful and best cards in your deck. So next up, we got Grismold the Dreadsower, and I actually really love this card. 3 mana, 3/3, legendary Troll Shaman. It has Trample. At the beginning of your end step, each player gets a 1/1 plant token, and then when a creature token dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Grismold the Dreadsower. So what I love about this card is it gives a commander for an archetype that is one of my favorite under the radar archetypes, a really janky, going really deep, crazy archetype that doesn't really have a good commander, and that is the kind of like group slug archetype almost. Basically, give your opponent stuff, but in a painful way. So what I'm picturing with Grismold, and like I said, there hasn't been a commander for this, is cards like Dowsing Dagger, Hungry Lynx, Hunted Troll, ways to give our opponents a bunch of tokens, and then obviously when those tokens die, we're going to go our Grismold, but we can go another step. We can play cards specifically to make them die, like Massacre Worm. Not only kills all those tokens, but it's going to deal a bunch of damage, and it's going to go our Grismold so we can maybe Voltron in for 1 attack. Knight of Soul Betrayal is just a combo. It's like you have Knight of Soul Betrayal, everything's getting a -1. Every turn you're going to give the table 4 tokens, which just ends up being 4 +1/+1 counters on Grismold. Cursed Eshold can do that with 1 player, and then if you throw in like Blood Artist, or maybe Revel in Riches, you have these weird win conditions as these creatures are dying that you're producing with Grismold and your other stuff, Primeval Protector maybe to like grow your team. So I really love the style of play that Grismold facilitates. We just have not had a commander to make the Dowsing Dagger, give your opponent stuff, kill their stuff for value plan really work, and Grismold is perfect for the strategy. It is ideal. Not only does it support the plan by giving your opponents tokens, but it turns into a win condition, a really big threatening win condition with Trample that's going to grow massive really quickly. So oddly, I am maybe most excited to build around Grismold out of all the commanders that we've seen so far, which probably sounds strange. It's just a rare. It's not one of the big face cards, but it's such a unique playstyle that just has not had enough support to really be a deck. And now Grismold, I think, is going to make it possible. So I am planning on building around this one very quickly, very soon, because it seems super ridiculous and fun. Next on our list, we got Thieving Amalgam, an Ape Snake, a 7-mana 6/7, where at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you mana face the top card of that player's library, and then whenever a creature you control but don't own dies, you get to essentially drain the owner of that card for 2. So Thieving Amalgam, maybe the easiest way to think of it, other than as a crazy ape snake, is as the black Atali. It's essentially like Atali. There's more steps built into it, but basically you're stealing cards from your opponent's deck. Every turn cycle, the result is kind of going to be the same. You will manifest a card from each of your opponents. Atali, you get to cast them for free, so there are drawbacks here. But I think that Thieving Amalgam, really nice fit for decks that are built around playing your opponent's stuff. If you're playing like Centriplets, you're playing Gonti, you're playing Jaliva, anything that's themed around, I'm taking your deck, I'm playing your cards, turning them against you. Thieving Amalgam is a perfect fit for a deck like this. A great addition in the right colors to make it work. So I think that that's the home. You could play it for value in any deck. Not sure it's worth it. Also, it is in the Morph deck. It does work well with Morphs where you're intentionally trying to get a bunch of face down creatures. So it has extra value there as well. But mostly I think this is a staple for decks that are built around playing with your opponent's stuff. We also got Apex Altisaur, and this one, it's really expensive. It is 9 mana for a 10/10. When it comes into play, you get to fight a creature, and then it has Enrage, so when it's damaged, you get to fight a creature. So Apex Altisaur, 9 mana is a lot. It is big. Fighting something's nice. I think that this card has kind of one home, and that is dinosaur tribal decks. Dinosaurs, since they are a new-ish tribe, really only taking off in Ixalan a couple of years ago, there's still not that many dinosaurs in an absolute sense. Dinosaurs, they have good ramp, they like to ramp, that's kind of what they're about, so they can cast a 9-drop. So I think if you're playing Zakama, you're playing Gishath, Galta, decks like that with a dinosaur tribal sub-theme, then I think that Apex Altisaur is a really good option. On the other hand, if you're playing a random green deck, I don't think the Apex Altisaur is good enough. If you have 25 years of Magic to pick a big green finisher, I think you're probably going to pick like Craterhoof Behemoth, some other card, and not Apex Altisaur. But if you care about being dinosaur tribal and staying on theme, especially with Gishath, which very actively cares about dinosaurs, then Apex Altisaur, pretty good option, because there's just not that many dinosaurs in existence, and this is another semi-decent one, especially for the dinosaur playstyle, like I said, that is good at ramping anyway, so casting a 9-drop isn't really that intimidating if you're playing a dinosaur deck. Otherwise, we got a ton of reprints, not going to spend long talking about them, but coming in the Sultai deck, if you pick it up, you get an Ixodron, one of the best morph payoffs in the format. Awesome new art. Vesuvian Shapeshifter, also with sweet new art. Bane of the Living, really good Wrath for a morph deck, one of the better morph creatures. Vraska the Unseen, it's like $4, so not bad value for coming as a reprint. Also, Chrome Shell Crab, another one of the all-star morph creatures with new art. Then we get a bunch of non-new art reprints. Tyrannic Resonator, another really solid reprint, has come down in price since it was in Masters 25, but still a few dollars. Thespian Stage, if you watch Commander Clash, it's like in every episode. We pretty much all play it in every deck now, thanks to Richard. Deathmas Raptor, Stratus Dancer, Kairu Spell Snatcher, Trail of Mysteries, Dead Protector, Nanteco Vigilante. So nothing so far that jumps off the page like, oh my god, that's so expensive. But some solid reprints, filling out the deck, powerful cards for the Morph archetype, and good to see them returning, especially with some sweet new art. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our daily spoilers for today, and good God, have we talked about a lot of cards. So many cards. So what do you think about this Sultai deck? What cards are you most excited for? What do you think of the new commanders? Volrath, how sweet is that card? What about Rayami? What do you want to do with that? What about Sudden Exchange? What about all the other random cards? Scroll of Fate, how good is that as a combo card for blank? What about Pendant of Prosperity? Can that work in a group hug style of archetype? Sudden in exchange, what do you want to do with that? Path of the Return, can that make some new commanders like Miosian playable? What about the leftovers from the weekend? Gerrard, how good of a combo piece could that be for Boros? All the other reprints, all the cards, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.